if you want to be a professional baseball player and you're going into the draft and you're debating college over pro ball, just how important it is to feel prepared for those moments and to love the game. The ones that grind through and get through all of the minor leagues and ride the buses and, get through all the failure are the ones that just love this game.
Welcome to today's episode where we are joined by a truly remarkable guest, a former Major League catcher and the current third base coach for the Cincinnati Reds, J.R. House. J.R.'s athletic journey is nothing short of extraordinary. As a two-sport star in high school, he excelled in both football and baseball. But when I say excelled, that's probably an understatement for this guy because he was arguably the very best high school quarterback to have ever come out of the state of West Virginia. Now, despite his incredible football talent, he actually chose a path of baseball, and he reached the big leagues not only once, but twice after a short stint of playing college football in between. Now, in this episode, we dive into JR's unique career, and we explore the key things that every player can do to prepare for the demands and the responsibilities of pro ball. We talk about how embracing failure can become a powerful learning tool. We talk about the mindset needed to navigate injuries and life's adversities, both on and off the field. JR also shares some invaluable advice for parents on handling tough conversations with their kids after they make mistakes, which ultimately helps them maintain confidence and allows them to continue enjoying the game. This episode, guys, is packed with insights, lessons, and personal stories that every athlete, coach, and parent can learn from. I truly hope you enjoy the show. Here we go. All right, so today's guest is J.R. House. J.R., thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. I love your story. I think a lot of families and parents can learn a ton from really what you went through. And just to kind of, I guess, set the stage for a minute, obviously, as everybody who's listening knows, my intention for this podcast is always the same, which is with the guests that I have on, I want to give these parents and players really actionable steps to take away from this podcast. So, JR, your specific situation is one where you grew up basically playing competitively at a high level two sports. You played football and were the quarterback, and then you obviously played baseball and you caught. How was that coming up through high school and even, I guess, before? Tell us about that journey and like how it developed.
Yeah, my dad had businesses in both places, and our family would really move from West Virginia to Florida annually. So like halfway through the year, right around Christmas, we would end up going to Florida, and then kind of midsummer, we would go back to West Virginia. And I did it really since the sixth grade, and same schools each time, same locations, same houses, and really did football and a little bit of basketball in West Virginia and baseball in Florida. And it worked out for us, two sets of friends, two different schools, got two diplomas from two different high schools. But our family structure was really because of the business, and then also because of sports for me. So I have a sister that's 5 years older than me, and she just got run around like crazy, just kind of following us. So it was difficult on her, but it was a great life for me.
So, JR, when you were playing both sports, did you think early on, you can go to the NFL? Like, was that ever a passion that you, something that you thought of, or no?
I love football in the sense from a contact standpoint. So coming up as a young athlete, I always played fullback and linebacker, so I just liked the physicalness of it. And I didn't start playing quarterback until the ninth grade. My dad actually hired a really good coach to come into our high school and tutor me to be a quarterback, put in a system. We threw it 60 times a game. Was able to start as a freshman on the high school team. And that group of players just got better and better every year. We're really good friends. We ended up winning the state championship our last year. So it was just kind of cool how that worked out with us. And it's still to this day my favorite sports moment of my life.
Well, for all the people that are listening, everybody probably hears, oh yeah, he played football and he played some baseball. Like I need to actually shed some light on how good of a football player you were. So I pulled this up. So you currently hold these records in the state of West Virginia in football. total offensive points in a season, total offensive yards in a season, total offensive yards in a career, completions in a game, pass completions in a season, pass completions in a career, pass attempts in a season and a career, passing yards in a game, season, and career, touchdown passes in a game, season, and career. I mean, that's you're basically Mr. Football for the state of West Virginia.
It was a good time.
Well, hear this. Yeah, you weren't just casually good, so you decided to play two sports. Like, you were breaking records at a pretty unbelievable pace.
Yeah, it was just kind of interesting how the group of players. I don't like to just talk about being a quarterback because we did both, right? So like quarterback on offense and middle linebacker on defense. So, but like holistically, the group itself grew because most of us played as freshmen too. So like every year we just kept getting better and better, and by the end of it, we were putting it on them pretty good.
So, what advice? I'm curious because I feel like a lot of recently, anyways. I had Alex McClure on this podcast, who's the West Coast cross-checker for the Tigers, and he talked about how he likes seeing kids play multiple sports. And I feel like it's kind of coming back. When we were kids, we all played multiple sports. And then I feel like it kind of went away for a period of time. And now I think it's kind of just coming back. So what advice would you have for kids who are kind of considering playing both, but maybe don't know if they should?
Yeah, I love the idea of range, like being able to play multiple sports, to do different things, because it's usually a different set of kids each time, right? So like you're having a different friends base, a different set of coaches, being able to do different things. Like I do love that part of it. And I think it's valuable. And for me personally, like it was a great experience throughout my life being able to play different sports. And I think the thing is like you have to be all in at that time, like the separation of it. Like I'm a football player now, I'm all in, I'm all about it, and not just waiting for the next thing, to where my heart isn't in it at that time. So when you're with that team, when you're with that group, when it's that season, like you're all in with them and going after it.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like there's a bit of a strategy involved. If you're a baseball player playing another sport, let's just say in the fall, there's a strategy involved in like making sure that what you're doing on a physical level is preparing you potentially for the spring season. And I'm not saying that you're working out so that you can be better in baseball in the spring, but it's being mindful of, oh, right, my strength program in the fall as a football player, let's just say, could add to my abilities in the spring, because look at what we're doing on the football field to practice and stay conditioned and all those different things. And the same goes for basketball too. So I think there are a lot of added real benefits from playing multiple sports. I do believe though you have to have the right mindset, and as you said, like you can't be like half, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You got to truly be committed to doing it. Otherwise, yeah, you should give that spot to some other kid from the school.
Yeah, and I mean the game of baseball, just going back to that now, is really pushing the limit in regards to athleticism. Like all the rules are benefiting the athletic player now. It's more exciting. It's what we want. Like we want guys that can run. We want guys that can do those great defensive plays. So it is important to make sure that you maintain like that athletic ability, and you're not just hitting all the time or just throwing. Like it's more holistic now.
Right. So let's move on. So obviously after your senior year in high school, you were a 5th round pick by the Pirates.
Yes.
And I want to kind of go over a little bit of just the very beginning stages of your career. So your first partial season, you hit over 300 between rookie league and short season, 2 levels that don't even exist today. But
Right.
Back when you played, obviously they would send you to some of these lower levels to kind of get your feet wet. The following year, you hit 348 with 23 homers. And in fact, you shared the Sally League MVP award with a name that a lot of people know, which is Josh Hamilton. When you first got to minor league baseball, like, what was the biggest adjustment that you felt like you needed to make as a player?
Well, I should have been Williamsport. My dad brought me up there, and the coach goes, "Okay, you got 3 days in the Holiday Inn." And I'm like, "Okay," and then what? He's like, "Well, you got to find a place to live." I'm like, "What do you mean I have to find a place to live? Like, I just got out of high school. Like, I got to rent an apartment. Like, what am I doing?" It's just like you kind of get thrown to the wolves, and it's different now because we do find housing for the players and there's host families and everything. But At that point, like that was it. You got 3 days and you're on your own, like you have to figure it out. You can build somebody's couch if you're not resourceful, So, thankfully my parents were there to be able to walk me through some of that and take care of me early on when I didn't have those life skills, or it would have been way more difficult. So just by having that backing and that support system, personally, it allowed me to be able to play baseball early, like quick, and be comfortable right away. Because a lot of guys on our team were not comfortable in those settings.
Right. Yeah, I can see how that's a challenge, right? You're 18 years old, and you've lived at home with mom and dad. You've never really had to fend for yourself, so to speak, and now you're being thrust into this situation where it's like, oh, wait, I have to figure this out? Okay. Right.
Yeah.
All while making sure that you're ready on the field.
Yeah, didn't go to college right away, right out of high school. So all that stuff was new. The Latin influence, the Spanish speakers, that part was a little new. Learning how to have like good relationships with those teammates, with different backgrounds. And one of the biggest things I think people forget is like how important it is to be likable, just in general, right? Like to be easy to cheer for, not only from a fan perspective, but like from your teammates and from a staff. Like you want them to really fall in love with you, and support you throughout your development, because you need everybody in your corner that you can get.
How did you handle communication as a catcher with some of these Latin pitchers who I would imagine spoke very little, if any, English?
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit of Spanglish here and there. I got to play 4 years of winter ball, so going down there and getting thrust into that, helps build up the vocabulary really quick because you have to. But early on, it's trial and error. You know what I mean? Like it's eye contact, it's glove love. When you're working with the pitchers, it's universal baseball signals, all those things to make sure that they know, as a catcher and a pitcher, like that battery that you are on their side, and you'll do anything you can to help them be good.
Well, yeah, and when you're first drafted and you're at the lower levels, I would imagine most of the Latin players at that point speak very little English. But as you move up, these guys have been around a little bit longer. They've been in the States longer. They've maybe taken some English classes. They've just interacted with more people. They start to speak a little bit better English. So it gets a little bit easier as you get closer to the big leagues. But I do see what would be a challenge right when you start, especially as a catcher. So then moving on in your career, after your first couple seasons, you started to get injured a few times. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of what that was like? It's common in this game when you're a professional athlete, like naturally there's going to be injuries from time and again. How did you deal with that happening in your career, especially at a young age?
Yeah, I mean, in total, I think I ended up having like 6 surgeries, 4 on my arm, all the good stuff. Tommy John, rotator labrum, shrinkage of the capsule, pretty much anything you can have wrong with your arm, I did, throughout the career. And it was kind of early on. Started off in AA. So it was really the first time that I struggled with any type of injury or just baseball kicking my butt for the first time. They kind of were hand in hand. So you got to figure out like what that whole process is, going to the doctors, dealing with the trainers, getting injected for the first time with cortisone, like all of those different things that you have to deal with and overcome to try to get back onto the field and become the player again that you once were. It was like almost every surgery, I just got a little worse. I got a little worse. And you fight really hard to get your body to stay in shape and be able to use it as you have in the past as a player. But in the end, my arm and my career kind of deteriorated with every surgery that I had. But overcoming those things, like it's preparing yourself as much as possible to be able to be durable is extremely important. It's almost like a gauntlet in the minor leagues, and the ones that can get through it and overcome all the adversity are the ones that ultimately become big leaguers and thrive. It's why it's there.
Yeah, and when you talk about injury, a concern that I always have with players is how is he going to handle it mentally, right? Because let's just say it's Tommy John and you're going to miss 12 to 14 months.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously when you first have the surgery, it's like, okay, you can't do anything, right? So you're pretty much just sitting there trying to move it a little bit, but not much you can do. As you continue on the pathway to recovery, though, it's like, yeah, there are some days that are monotonous and it's hard, right? You're oftentimes back at the Arizona or the Florida complex in spring training where Very few people are. It's usually only the younger guys or the guys that are injured. And here you are having to like show up at the field every day for an hour, get your treatment, and then go back to the hotel or the apartment and just a lot of times sit there, play video games. Like there's not much to do. So
No,
that's one of those things that I feel like for any player, it's hard.
yeah, and it's you have to find things to do, just in general as far as spending your time, and it not become a negative, because a lot of times the guys go out and they get out of shape. They don't keep their mind right. They start getting into like really bad things, whether it be, drugs or hanging out in wrong areas, or a lot of careers have been derailed that way, not only just from the injury, but that time away from baseball, because normally we're so focused and it's all day long, and we love being able to do that, but once that is taken away, now what are you made of, like
Right.
Becoming a better person, becoming a better man, like all those things, making sure that you keep those relationships intact, is really important at the time.
So as your career started to take shape, once you kind of came back from the injuries, you eventually fought through and you got to the big leagues. Spent parts of, I believe it was 2 seasons with Pittsburgh in the big leagues.
Yeah.
And then at one point, it seemed like they kind of had a crop of younger catchers coming up, and then they ultimately released you.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a tough situation. It was in '05. I was hurt. My arm was hurt again. I needed to have surgery. They actually didn't want me to have surgery. And flew to see Dr. Andrews. He told me that my shoulder was banged up, used a lot of big terms in describing it, said I needed to have surgery. I ended up having the surgery, and they wanted me to, the Pirates just in general at the time wanted me to, play left field, be the right hand guy off the bench, that type of stuff. But I couldn't throw because I was injured. So they ended up releasing me 2 weeks after surgery. I'm in a sling. So I have no job, no medical coverage, like none of that stuff. And it was a very, very difficult time. So I get released. I'm driving home from spring training because it's in Bradenton. I'm driving home back to Florida, and Coach Rich Rodriguez, who was at West Virginia University, calls my cell phone. He's like,
The football
"Hey,
coach."
Yeah, the football coach. He's like, "Hey, I just heard the news. Like, how you doing? You want to come up for a visit?" And I'm 25 years old at the time, and I'm like, "I don't know, Coach." He said, "Well, we don't have a quarterback. You can come up, check it out, see what you think, and see if this is something that you want to do. We'll take care of your arm. We'll do your rehab for you. And at the end of the season, if you don't win the quarterback job and you want to go back and play football, you can. You'll be healthy, ready to go. Kind of use it as a rehab stint." So I spent my rehabbing my shoulder, going back to school, played for West Virginia University for 1 season. We beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, finished 5th in the nation, met a lot of friends as far as like lifelong friends there, had a good time, just had some mop up duty, as far as like playing wise, got to play in a couple games. So all that stuff was great. And then after the bowl game, I signed back with the Astros with the big league camp, and got up a little bit with them the next year.
Yeah, so that's what's crazy is so you take this, you like veer to the right, you go join the football team, you guys win the Sugar Bowl, Georgia, from what I remember. You guys were like 11-1 that season.
We were pretty good.
You came back to baseball.
Yeah.
And then fought back to the big leagues.
Yes. That's how it went. The summer running program, like the conditioning in football and college, was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And here I am. I'm kind of a broken down 25-year-old catcher that's surgery fat right now. I'm in an arm sling, and I'm trying to do all these things that these young bucks are doing that are just in general from an athletic perspective way faster and better than me at the time. So it was really challenging. I was also the 6th quarterback going into it. So they only allow the first 2 guys to wear the yellow jerseys, and then everybody else gets pounded on pretty good. So I definitely in practice got my butt kicked for a while until I was able to get like to the 2nd string spot where I could wear the jersey and not get crushed.
So JR, when you got back into pro ball and then got back to the big leagues, I mean, because there wasn't that much time that passed, I'm curious if you noticed any changes to the game that maybe were things that started to pop up that you didn't see the first time you were in the big leagues.
No, I think for me, it was more of like it was just a perspective, playing each game, like how much I missed it, how much I missed baseball. And by going back and playing football, I always wondered beforehand, like if I had made a mistake, if I was really missing something. And I think through that process, by being able to do it, I found out like I really love baseball. And this
Right.
is what I want to do for the rest of my life, whether I'm playing, coaching, whatever, like I want to be in it. So it was a good awakening for me, myself personally.
Yeah, I think it's important for anybody to have a very clear kind of focus, is what I would call it, right? I mean, I can only imagine if you're playing one sport, wondering, should I have gone a different route? Like, and I know some baseball players that feel that way, like about golf, right? I bet if I didn't play baseball, I could be a golfer. And then they go do it for a short time. They realize, oh, wait a minute. No, I'm good on Saturdays and Sundays with the boys, but I probably shouldn't make that my career. I'm going to go back into baseball. And it refocuses their efforts. So that just an observation. But so you end up career, I believe it was it 20, what year was it?
The last year?
Yeah, you played independent ball at one point, I remember.
Yeah, 2011 was my last year playing baseball in general, and I played with the Long Island Ducks in indie ball. Had a great time, got to reunite with my first ever full season manager, Jay Laviglio. I lived in his cottage in the back.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and he was the hitting coach on that team and just a lifelong friend. And again, that's super important. Like if anybody is from a high school perspective or college going into pro ball, is like meet as many people as you can, make as many relationships as you can, because it's there. Who knows what's going to happen down the road? Like so many times we've brought in players with the Reds or when I was with the Diamondbacks, just because I knew them personally and really liked them, and or somebody else knew them, and you get jobs that way. You stay in the game longer because of it. It's extremely valuable.
And so, JR, you get done playing and you eventually get into coaching.
Yes. It was kind of right away. As soon as I was done playing, it was kind of like midway through the season in 2011 with the Ducks. And I caught both games of a doubleheader. There were like 3 scouts that I knew in the stands, like really good friends with. And I went, I don't know, I was like 4 for 5 with 3 doubles and like threw out a guy or whatever. So like I had a great day and I still got nothing, like crickets. And so it was like after that day, I was like, yeah, this is going to be my last year playing. So I created a resume, started sending it out to all the teams, started calling all the people that I know in regards to the game and trying to get in as a coach, even when I was still playing. And it was great. I had really good response because so many times you stop getting calls and as a player, like when you're at the end of your career, and then once they know that you're ready to coach and you want to do that, you start getting more response again. And it's nice. It's like a rebirth almost in the game.
Right. Yeah. It can go old, man, towards the end of a playing career when you feel like you're being ignored a little bit and, you feel like the writing's on the wall and you're trying to fight through the adversity, but you feel like it's all falling on deaf ears. Right. So I can only imagine, getting a phone call back about coaching and managing. It's like, okay, great. Like, do you see me? Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Over the next couple of years, then you obviously became a manager in the Diamondbacks organization. And I had some clients who played for you. And I will tell you, man, like they would describe you as like one of, if not the best manager they ever had. Because I think you were, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were able to take all the adversity and the things that you learned as a player, and you really tried to apply it to a lot of these younger kids that you were managing. And you were more of like, at least this is how I kind of experienced you as a manager. You were like a mentor. You would bring guys under your wing to really help them because you wanted them to have successful careers.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Like one of the best things is just seeing them live out their dreams, because it is about them. It's not about you anymore. Like I've had my time, my playing career is over. So I always wanted to be a coach or coach players how I would want to be coached, as simple as that is. So it's being a friend when you have to. It's making sure that you have permission, to kick them in the butt when they need it, and that they're responsive to that, because it doesn't always work for everybody. Like I have 3 kids and I have to discipline them differently. Like each one responds to different things. And I think that's really important as a manager, as a coach, just making sure that you are reaching each player how they need to be, the best way to coach them personally, because everybody learns differently, and it's your responsibility to figure that out. So just to be a one-trick pony, or to not have the skills to be able to reach each person, you're doing them a disservice.
Well, so I love what you just said, because we all go to, if you go to a little league game, you'll hear a mom or a dad out there try to yell at the kid, who's hitting it at that time. And they're trying to just tell him, like, do this, just do this. And when the player undoubtedly doesn't, then it's like, what's wrong with you? What happened? Why can't you just listen to me? Right.
Right.
What is the advice that you would give a parent? And I'm thinking about what you said about, like, you have to ask for permission. You put yourself in a parent's shoes. Like, how would you ask for permission in that example I gave?
I think one of the biggest things is like really understanding the embarrassment of it, and like the humiliation in front of their peers. So when you are having those difficult conversations, that it's in private, and it's not in front of everybody to where they're going to be laughing at them at school the next day, like that part is really, really important. A lot of times it's not good to the big rating of it, and there are times when you have to have those conversations, but that you're really doing it in a professional type way, and you're not humiliating your kid.
Yeah, that makes sense. So JR, you obviously spent a couple years in the Diamondbacks organization, and then you were hired by the Cincinnati Reds as the catching coach and third base coach.
Yeah, and the job that nobody else wants is the scheduling, all the computer stuff, building schedules, and
which you thrive in, by the way.
I think one of the things of like adding value, to yourself, whether you're a player or you're a business person or whatever is in what you do is like being able to do the jobs that nobody else really wants to, and being good at them, so that whoever your boss is knows that you'll handle it and it'll be organized. It's not something that they have to oversee or babysit, and they can hand it off to you, and being responsible enough. So having those skills, whether it's like keyboarding, be able to type fast, whether it's using Excel or building PowerPoints or, whatever that part is, adding that to your resume and learning those skills. And I was able to start that process when I went back to West Virginia, and ended up getting my degree from the University of Phoenix online. Like all of that work that I had to do to get those things, it started with the computer, and being able to manage that and learn it. And it's helped me. I would never been able to be a field coordinator for the Diamondbacks if I didn't know how to do Excel and build out PowerPoints and like all those different things. And same thing with this job. It's just really helped me.
So JR, obviously you're in the big leagues with the Reds as the third base coach, and as you mentioned, doing these other tasks as well. So you're seeing firsthand how these big leaguers act and prepare for a game every single day. How would you describe, like, can you walk us through what does it look like as these big leaguers get to the field? Like, how do they prepare?
One of the biggest things is like no one likes to be rushed. So they like to get there early. They like to be able to eat, to do a crossword, right? Like to do their homework as far as like the scouting report. They don't want the crunch of the timing. They like to be able to do their routines as far as hitting in the cage or defense or stretching out or whatever it is, the mobility work that they do, but allotting that time for them. So whatever you're, I guess, demanding of them on the field, you allow them to have their time to get done the stuff that they need to do before they're out on the field ready to work. I think that part is really, really important. When you start crunching things really together, there's irritation that builds up because they need that time to get ready for the day.
What's something that would be surprising for any one of these players or parents listening? And like the thought that comes to mind is, if I was a kid, I wonder, do big leaguers do more than I think they would do? Do they actually do less? And I can see it going both ways, right? Let's just say somebody's in their 30s and this guy's been playing basically his whole life, right? He's ingrained the game of baseball into his mind, right? His mechanics at the plate, defensively, the fundamentals. So are they work just as hard as they always did? Do you see that, or do you actually see them maybe working more so on like the mental side to prepare?
I think there's probably growth in all of that. Like there's a reason why they've been a big leaguer for a little while, because they probably have nice routines. They probably know how to listen to their body. So on some days they'll hit a ton because they really need to work on something specific. Some days they won't because they're locked in and they feel good. So a lot of it is just kind of knowing where you are at the time and making sure that you're handling it and take care of your business. And I do think it's different too for like different personalities. Some people like just to grind it out and do crazy amounts because it kind of checks the box for them and they feel prepared. And then others don't. They like to do a little bit less. They like to go through their day in a little bit slower pace. And the biggest thing is that you got to find out what works for each one. So if the slow pace guy isn't playing worth a crap, like, hey, we need to pick it up a little bit. Like we need to do a little bit different things. Look at this guy over here who's working really hard and being super successful. Maybe you should start doing some of that stuff, and as general as that sounds, it is like, we're always trying to help them as best we can. If it's a tweak, if it's something to add, if it's something to take out, whatever it is throughout their days.
Hey, help out a kid who, let's just say, hasn't been called up to the big leagues yet, and maybe he's in the minor leagues. What should that kid do when he gets called up? Like, how should he act in the clubhouse?
So the first thing you should do is go to the manager's office and shake his hand. Look him in the eye. Make sure that he knows he's there. He's ready for to play that day. That's something that really wasn't told to me until, I don't know, maybe my 7th year in professional baseball. But as soon as like they signed that contract, you should tell that player that's what you should do, no matter where you go. A ball, double A, first thing, as soon as you get there, you get called up or sent down. You go in there and you shake the manager's hand. You let him know you're ready to work. I think that's crucial.
And then what about, like, how do you carry yourself in the clubhouse with these other veterans?
I think the biggest thing is not overstepping, having feel and self-awareness as far as the situation, because a lot of these guys have played together for a long time, right? So there's cliques or there's circles or whatever, and then trying to integrate yourself into those, not too hot, not coming in when it's unwanted, but at the same time, it's much easier when you bring value to the team on the field. So as soon as they can see that you're actually going to help them and help the team, it's easy to get involved with the rest of them, within the clubhouse. I think today's game is a little bit more acclimated to the younger player because it happens fast and we want them to be successful. Whereas in the past, maybe the veterans weren't so
welcoming.
Yeah, like, we're so welcoming. Yeah. So, ultimately you're taking their job, right? Like at times you're taking maybe one of their spots. So they really kind of pushed you out. That's not really the case now. And we make sure that we bring in personalities and the type of player that welcomes the new guy and will help them become better quick.
Yeah. I always tell guys, like, look, man, rely on common sense. Should you go into like if you were starting a job and you showed up to the office day one and you just like walked out like a peacock with your chest puffed out and you were like, look at me.
Right.
I think that would be received probably not well. You want to kind of blend in, be a teammate. And then over time, as you say, like, let your performance dictate how you can act, how you can respond. Always recognizing, look, I'm a fan of humility, obviously. So I'm never one to say, be boastful and tell everybody how great you are. Like, there's those old sayings, like, when you're going good, you don't have to tell anybody. They'll tell you.
Yeah, that's right. I think baseball players, they really sniff out the BS real quick, so when you're putting on a show and you're not genuine, like they're going to know right away, like you're not fooling anybody, like it is important to have confidence and be able to carry on the conversations and those types of things. But like going out of your way to do things that really aren't organic to you, like they're going to figure that out real quick.
Yeah. And so to follow up on that, how would you describe, because I have my own assumptions and obviously I've experienced this working with guys. How would you say that players today are different from players 10 or 15 years ago?
I think they're dealing with a lot, and not that they didn't, back then, but like the social media stuff is real, like you have one bad game and you make one mistake and you're getting crushed. Like it's to a point where it's like a security matter. And like there's threats out there, and I think that part is tough for them. Like everything is, the cameras are better, they're right in your face. You make one mistake, like they're on you. So you just really have to protect yourself, and make sure that you're not doing anything that is going to hurt you, right away, because somebody's seeking to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen firsthand, and shout out to MLB security because they've done phenomenal work just making sure these guys are obviously protected in the event that something like that were to happen. JR, how would you say that we all look at the game who are in the game? We all look at the game and we're seeing that there are trends in this game, right? Most recently, the trend seems to be like you're going to have a few positions, a few players that are superstars that are going to be in the lineup every single day. But then there are these other spots where it seems like now more than ever, a lot of platoon players are around, right? You got a righty outfielder facing a lefty pitcher and vice versa, right? And there's guys that obviously move around, bounce around. So what is the biggest difference for you between those two types of players? And I don't mean literal baseball player. I mean, like, what do you see when you see a player get called up? Can you tell this guy's going to be an everyday guy, or this guy's probably going to be a platoon guy? Do you notice the difference?
I think when you look at their game, the guys that are the everyday guys, they just have more solutions to problems. Like they're able to hit a right on, they're able to hit a right on right breaking ball because they have more barrel diversity, right? Like they can let it travel, go the other way. They don't always have to hook it. They use the whole field. They're able to walk. Say it's left on left, they're able to walk against a lefty. Like they're able to get a bunt base hit off of a lefty if it's left on left. Like they just have more things that they can do in a positive manner to contribute. So they're just more of an all-around player. So when you're developing throughout the minor leagues and player development, like we're trying to build that. We're trying to make sure that they are bunting, that they are facing the right on right or the left on left, and give them as many opportunities to get through that and figure it out as they possibly can, even if it means failure, even if it means losing a game, like in the minor leagues, because ultimately we're trying to develop them to the big leagues and be able to be successful there.
And I love that you said that. I think that's one of the most poignant things you've said. It makes total sense. And it really got me thinking, like, when I think about a player who fails, is it correct to say there are certain players that fail well and other players that don't fail well? Right? Like, have you seen guys who, so what does that look like? Like, how would you describe a player who fails well?
Yeah, I mean, you can use like all the cliche terms of failing forward and like I always learn, like anytime that happens. But in the end, they are like they're dissecting their performance, whether it was good or bad, and they're taking something positive out of it, and they're not continuing to do the same thing in a negative way over and over again, and they're just learning. And it takes time, it takes experience, and it does take failure. But in the end, you just keep building experience and you get better, and they take steps forward. And you can kind of see it happen because those at-bats keep coming, like every day. Those opportunities to make plays keep coming every day. And that's why you have to love baseball because it's played every day. And if not, you're going to get beat down. And the more failure you have, the more you're going to not like it. So you just really have to love it and love the play because there are going to be hard times for sure.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest adjustments players need to make from amateur baseball to professional baseball when they get in the minor leagues is, what does it feel like to get everyday at bats? And everyone thinks, oh yeah, I mean, I would perform better if I got everyday at bats. But it's a different thought when you're like, yeah, if you're doing well, I can see how that would feel good to be back in the lineup the next day. But what about the reverse? What about when you go 0 for 16 with 12 punch outs? How do you feel knowing that you're in the lineup again and you feel like you can't stop this train?
No doubt. Oh, I've been there lots of times. We see it all the time. I think one of the biggest things that helped me personally was like taking it to a ground level, so like I'm just unable to pull a ball right now, from a hitting perspective. So I'm just going to let it travel, and I'm going to try to work the 4-hole and get myself a knock, and feel good about it, and then go on. Like power is out of the gate today. I'm not worrying about that. I'm going to cut the plate in half, and I'm just going to go to that side, because eventually you're going to get something over there. So like I'm going to take advantage of that, or the vice versa. And I think that's one of the better ways to be able to get yourself out of that train wreck that's happening every time you step into that box.
Right. So I want to plug Jamie Westbrook, who was a player that played for you, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Jamie played for you. I think it was in Visalia, if I'm not mistaken, that year.
And Jackson. Yeah.
And Jackson. You're right.
Yes.
And AA. One of the 4 years he was in AA consecutively.
That's right.
Told a really great story in the podcast that we just shot when he was in LA. And basically he has a conversation with Tristan Casas in the dugout before his very first game in the big leagues. And he said, Tristan, my first game, man, what do you got for me? Give me something. And Tristan looks around and he basically says, Jamie, for this game to end, someone's going to have to fail today. So be mindful of how you fail. And when Jamie told me that, it was like, I've never heard anybody describe it quite like that, right? And the reason I loved it is because I think players approach the game thinking, we don't want to fail. That's bad. Let's avoid failure. This is a game of failure. And so what Tristan so eloquently explained is we know it's a game of failure. So assuming that the only way the game ends is because someone just failed.
Yeah.
So
be
mindful that, yeah, you're going to have a game and you may go 0 for 4 one day, but you still can do certain things good on the baseball field. Maybe it's on the other side of the ball. Maybe you drew a walk and that ultimately, ended up being the winning run that you scored. Don't, just because you're not swinging the bat well at the plate, don't think that means you're not useful the rest of the game. I'm curious, JR, if there was any moment that you had with maybe a veteran player throughout your career that said something to you that was like, oh, that's just brilliant, and that you've continued to kind of preach to guys today.
I mean, kind of on a different perspective, I was locker mates with Kevin Millar, and I was DHing with Baltimore, and I hit a home run. It was my first home run I ever hit in the big leagues, and I'm feeling great, obviously coming around. And he's the first one, top stepping at the dugout. He gives me a high five. He goes, anybody can hit one, and I'm like, oh, what a teammate, you know what I mean? Right out of the gate. But it's so true as far as you're talking about failure, but also on the success, is it's just one at bat. You got to go again, and you got to go again, and you got to go again. So enjoying the moment, no doubt about it. But in the end, he's right. Can you hit two? Can you continue to be greedy throughout the day, or is your day done because you just hit a homer? I thought being around, I don't want to drop names a ton, but Joey Votto, being around him, for the last 5 years.
Yeah, this guy right here.
Yeah, he was after it, and he was the most disciplined player I've been around, and seeing the way he works, and everything was about how he can perform well, and he never gave away at bats, and whether he was 4 for 4 or 0 for 4, he was after that fifth at bat with everything that he possibly can, and I really appreciate it about him.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Why he's great.
I've heard that too. So I've obviously worked with Joey for a long time, and Johnny Gomes, who played with Joey at one point. It was funny. I saw Johnny in the offseason that year, and I said, hey, by the way, how was Joey? I got to tell you, man, I learned so much from this guy. And this is Johnny Gomes, who kind of was more of a veteran as far as being around earlier than Joey was. But he's saying that he learned so much from Joey. And I said, what's the biggest takeaway for you? And he goes, Matt, the minute that guy gets to the field, the minute he's there, it is tunnel vision. He is on a mission. Every single swing in the cage is 100%. There's no casual messing around, taking it easy. He flips a switch when he shows up, and it's something that I've never seen before. And this is somebody, Johnny, who he had been on 4 or 5 teams up to that point.
Right. Yeah. I love Johnny. He's one of my better friends. But and he's not easily impressed. Johnny isn't,
Oh,
so for him to say that about another human being, like it's real. That's for sure.
yeah. And he obviously speaks differently than I am. He's like, oh, I'm about it. I'm all about it. Like that's how he says it. So,
Have you had him on the podcast? Have you had Johnny yet?
talk to him actually. He's going to come on.
Oh, it's great. He's tremendous.
And he offers so much insight.
Yes, he does.
He's been through it all. And he's obviously a comedian at the same time. So I feel like it'd be enjoyable.
And I don't know the exact specifics of it, but like he's one of the only guys I've ever heard of is like, I think he only got like one multi-year deal. He played in close to 15 years in big leagues, and everything was like a 1 year deal, 1 year deal, 1 year deal. And you talk about like having value and being able to re-up every year and staying hungry. That's impressive.
Yeah, and look, he was putting up numbers too. That's the crazy thing. I mean, this guy was hitting close to 20 homers almost every season and getting 1 year deals. And then, he was with Oakland, and then we signed that 2 year deal with Boston.
Yeah.
And that was when they won it, So he, his stories are great. If people haven't seen this, go watch his World Series speech at the parade for the Kansas City Royals, and you'll absolutely get a feel for who Johnny Gomes is. And do that in advance of us having him on the podcast, so you guys can send me questions beforehand. Well, JR, as we wrap up, is there anything that you feel like needs to be shared with the next generation that maybe I hadn't asked you about? Anything that comes to mind?
No, I just want people to know, like, if you want to be a professional baseball player and you're going into the draft and you're debating college over pro ball, just how important it is to feel prepared for those moments and to love the game. When the scouts kept coming over to my house, like kind of the recruiting stuff, for pro ball, it's like that was the main thing that they always asked and wanted to know, like looking into my eyes, like deep down into my soul, like, do you love baseball? And I'm like, why do you keep asking me this? Like, I don't understand. And like being in this 26 years now, either as a player or as a coach, like I get it. Like I understand what they were saying. It's like, you do. Like the ones that make it, they love this game, and especially if you're not like uber talented, the ones that grind through and get through all of the minor leagues and ride the buses and, get through all the failure are the ones that just love this game. And I think that's extremely important. So if it's not something that you really, really enjoy doing and it's how you want to spend your life, then you should pursue other things, because it's a battle for sure.
Well, I love that you said that. I feel like every player at some point gets their teeth kicked in this game. Maybe for some, it's right when they get drafted. Others, it could be when they get to AA or AAA. For some, it could be right when they get to the big leagues. For some, it's years after they got to the big leagues, but they eventually get their teeth kicked in. And when that happens, it's a very uncomfortable feeling. And then it starts to compound where now it's like, oh, you're failing at a level that you've never failed at before. And maybe because you haven't failed, you don't even know how to get out of it. That just starts to create this snowball effect. And so to your point, the only way guys ultimately get past that is they have to be diligent and they really have to want to work through it.
That's right.
So if you don't love the game, at some point, maybe you're going to work less hard than you otherwise should, or you're just going to eventually get to a place where you're like, I don't want to put the time in that it's going to require to come. Like, I'm done with it. And you start to get angry and resentful. So I tell kids through the draft often, like, you're not going to fool anybody into drafting you above where you otherwise should. Like, you're not going to convince somebody because they saw you one time that, ooh, look, I'm a first rounder. And then you like go hide for 6 months, right? It's going to be a consistent showing how good you are every single day. And assume you're somebody who's fortunate enough to get drafted and paid a lot of money out of the draft. Obviously, you got a ton of things going for you. But once you get to the minor leagues, now it's like, okay, great that you were a first rounder. Great that you got paid money. But now there's an expectation. Now, how are you going to meet that expectation? That's a whole nother challenge that I think many kids ultimately see before it comes to them. So that's why, bro, I got to be honest with you. Like, I love, and it's why I wanted to have you on here. I love that there is a person on the team side who cares as much as you do about a player's success. And that's something that, like, I don't just say. I mean, I've seen it, JR. For 20 years, I've watched it. I've seen how you've battled through the minor leagues. I mean, I remember when you called and said you were going to play football, I thought you were absolutely insane.
Maybe a little bit.
For that, but for that to then happen, and then you get back to baseball, then you get back to the big leagues, like, look, you got a very bright future in this game, and I think the game of baseball is better for having you in it. I just encourage you, man. Like, people notice. Just keep doing it because this game needs more of it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it, bud. Thanks for having me on.
No,
it's great.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Look, I'm sure, parents will reach out and ask additional questions, which I will certainly give them the answers to.
Okay.
But yeah, man, I mean, obviously, I love you. You're a dear friend of mine too. So I always root for you, and just keep doing your thing, man.
Thanks, Matt.